Think about this. We live in the era with the most access to spiritual wisdom in human history, yet we seem to be the least transformed by it. You can scroll through thousands of sacred words in a single morning, but how much of it actually changes the way you breathe, think, or love? Most of us have mastered the art of scanning. We recognize the letters, we see the ink, but our spirits remain silent. It's a strange kind of spiritual illiteracy. You are reading the text, but the text isn't reaching you. And if your study leaves you with a full notebook but an empty heart, something is fundamentally broken. Let's talk about why your eyes see the words, but your soul stays hungry. Now, why does it feel like there is a wall between you and the truth? You've tried the plans, you've followed the schedules, but at the end of the day, you feel like you're just moving your eyes across a screen or a page without anything actually moving inside of you. Let me tell you a secret that might sting, but it will set you free. The problem isn't just your lack of discipline. The problem is that you are trying to use a 21st century brain to understand an ancient rhythm, and the two are out of sync. You see, we have experienced a massive reverse evolution in how we process truth. We have moved from a culture of the ear to a culture of the eye, and that shift changed everything. For thousands of years, sacred words weren't meant to be looked at in a silent room. They were meant to be heard in a shouting crowd. When you see something, you feel like you own it. You scan it. You analyze it. You master it with your gaze. But when you hear something, you have to submit to it. You can't rush a sound. You can't skim an echo. You have to wait for the speaker to finish. Think about the tragedy of silent reading. When you read in total silence, the words become information. They become data points that you can file away in your mind. But in the ancient world, the word for obeying was the same as the word for hearing. Why? Because sound creates a vibration in your physical body. It requires presence. When you read silently, you are the judge, and the book is the defendant. But when you hear the word, the roles are reversed. But here is where most people get stuck. They say, how can I trust what I'm hearing when there are so many versions? I see 7,000 different translations. How do I know which one is the real voice of God? This is where your confusion turns into a cage. But let's break that cage right now with what I call the triangulation model. Stop looking for the perfect English word and start looking for the perfect heartbeat. Imagine a triangle. At the first point, you have the source, the raw ancient Greek and Hebrew. At the second point, you have the intent, the cultural heart of the people who first heard it. And at the third point, you have the destination, the language you speak today. Most people panic because they see different words in different Bibles. One says love, another says charity, another says affection. They think the truth is lost? No. The truth is found in the center of that triangle. You are not looking for a single magic word. You are looking for the intersection of those 3 points. Some translations are what we call formal. They try to mirror the exact structure of the old language. They are accurate, but they can be cold. Others are dynamic. They try to capture the emotional punch of the message. They are warm, but they can be loose. If you want to hear God speak, you have to stop being a version hunter and start being a forensic student. You don't need a degree in linguistics. You just need to realize that the variety of versions isn't a sign of weakness. It's a gift of perspective. It's like having 3 different cameras filming the same scene from different angles. One shows the wide shot, one shows the close-up, and one shows the movement. If you only look at one camera, you miss the depth. But when you triangulate, the image becomes 3-dimensional. So here is your first shift in perspective. Stop reading to possess information. Start reading to receive a vibration. Realize that the book in your hand is a script meant to be performed, not just a text meant to be archived. When you understand that the goal isn't to find the right English word, but to align yourself with the eternal intent, the wall begins to crumble. But wait, there's a deeper reason why your brain resists this. It's not just about the culture of the eye versus the ear. It's about what happens inside your gray matter when you stop scanning and start listening. There is a biological bridge that most people never cross. Let's talk about the science of the soul. Listen closely. For a long time, we've been told that hearing God is a mystical zap from the sky. We wait for a thunderclap, a sudden shiver, or a voice booming from the clouds. But what if the voice you are looking for is already being processed by the very hardware God placed inside your skull? I'm talking about your brain, not as a cold, mechanical computer, but as a biological bridge designed for the ultimate connection. You see, there is a hidden variable in your spiritual life that no one ever talks about, your neurobiology. When you move past the surface and truly dive into the Word, you aren't just performing a religious chore, you are triggering a sophisticated biological event. Scientists call it the activation of the default mode network, or the DMN. This isn't the part of your brain that calculates your taxes or plans your commute. This is your social brain. It is the part of you that processes identity, empathy, and relationships. It is the hardware for intimacy. When you sit in silence and engage deeply with these ancient texts, your DMN lights up. Your brain stops looking at the page as a list of rules and starts looking at it as a personhood. This is a mechanism called theory of mind. It's the same process your brain uses to understand the intentions, the emotions, and the heart of your spouse or your best friend. But here, the other you are simulating is the creator of the universe. Your brain is literally building a mental model of God's character based on the data in the text. You aren't just learning about him, your brain is learning to hear him by predicting his response to your life. This is what I call neural synchronization. Think of it like a radio receiver tuning into a distant but powerful frequency. When you immerse yourself, you aren't just studying in the academic sense. You are tuning your internal circuits to match the broadcast of the author. When your thoughts begin to align with the rhythms of the Word, it's because your neural pathways are starting to fire in sync with the logic of the infinite. And don't miss this. This connection isn't just in your head, it's in your blood. When that synchronization happens, when the aha moment hits and the truth settles into your soul, your brain releases a specific cocktail of chemicals. It releases oxytocin, the hormone of trust and bonding. It's the same chemical that creates the bond between a mother and her child, and it releases dopamine, the chemical of revelation and reward. This is why you feel that profound sense of peace. This is why you feel known and seen in the middle of a quiet room. It isn't a hallucination. It isn't a trick of the mind. It is a biological confirmation that your spirit has found its source. You aren't just reading a book. You are engaging in a neurobiological conversation. You are letting the Word of God rewire your nervous system. So stop asking God to scream from the heavens and start asking your brain to synchronize with what He has already spoken. Stop treating your Bible study like a history class and start treating it like a neural upgrade. You were built for this. Your synapses were designed to carry the weight of His voice. Information makes you smart, but this biological synchronization makes you whole. But here is the danger. Even with the best hardware, and even with the perfect frequency, there is a signal jammer that can ruin the entire connection. There is a reason why, even when you understand the science, you still feel a massive resistance every time you try to go deep. Your brain wants the connection, but your identity is terrified of it. To truly hear the voice, you have to understand why your very soul is trying to block the signal. Let's talk about the wall of the self and the paradox of why the truth has to hurt before it can heal. But let's get even more real. Even if you understand the science, and even if you've synced your brain to the frequency, there is a massive wall standing between you and the truth. And that wall isn't built of ignorance. It's built of your own identity. I want to challenge the biggest assumption you have when you open a sacred text, the belief that you are an objective observer. You think you are standing on the outside looking in, analyzing the words. You aren't. In quantum physics, there's a concept called the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. It basically says that the act of observing a particle changes the behavior of that particle. You cannot watch something without affecting it. The same thing happens when you study. You don't read the text as it is. You read the text as you are. You bring your baggage, your trauma, your political leanings, and your hidden insecurities to every single verse. You think you're looking for truth, but most of the time, you're just looking for an echo. You're looking for a verse that agrees with the version of yourself you've already decided to be. This is what psychologists call the identity wall. Your brain is designed to protect your sense of self. When you encounter a truth that challenges your current lifestyle or your deep-seated opinions, your brain doesn't see it as enlightenment. It sees it as a threat. It triggers the same part of your nervous system that responds to physical pain. This is why you find certain chapters boring or confusing. Most of the time, they aren't actually confusing. They're just threatening. You skip them or forget them because your identity wall is doing its job. It's filtering out anything that would force you to change. Do you see the paradox? You say you want God to speak, but you've built a fortress to make sure he only says what you want to hear. You're looking for a hug in the text, but sometimes God is trying to perform surgery, and you can't have the healing without the incision. This is the intellectual peak of your journey, realizing that the goal of study is not to know more, it is to be broken more. Information is safe. You can collect information all day and stay exactly the same person. You can have a head full of Greek and Hebrew and still be a slave to your pride. But revelation is dangerous. Revelation is the moment the text stops being an object you study and becomes a subject that studies you. Imagine you are looking at a painting. Usually you judge the painting. You decide if it's good, if the colors are right, if you like the style. But true study is like walking into a gallery where the painting starts judging you. It looks at your heart. It questions your motives. It exposes the things you've been hiding in the dark. Most people quit at this stage. They feel the cognitive dissonance, that inner tension that makes you want to close the book and go check your phone. They feel the heat of the truth hitting their identity wall, and they retreat back to the comfortable verses. They go back to the quotes that make them feel good about themselves. But if you want to walk in power, you have to stay in the room when it gets uncomfortable. You have to stop using the text as a telescope to look at everyone else's sins and start using it as a searchlight for your own soul. You have to move from being an observer to being a defendant. Ask yourself this: when was the last time a verse actually made you lose sleep? When was the last time a truth made you apologize to someone you've been resentful toward? If it hasn't happened lately, you aren't studying. You're just browsing. You're still an observer. You're still standing on the outside, safe and sound, while the creator of the universe is trying to dismantle the version of you that is keeping you small. You have to decide. Do you want to be right or do you want to be transformed? Because you can't be both. To hear the voice of God clearly, you have to allow his word to tear down your identity wall, brick by brick. You have to let it read your secrets, interrupt your excuses, and rewrite your future. But how do you move from this identity crisis into actual tangible change? How do you stop being a professional observer and start being a real-world practitioner? It's one thing to let the word break you. It's another thing to let it build you into something new. That transformation requires a final shift, a move from the mind to the feet. You've felt the discomfort. You've seen the wall of your identity start to shake. But here is the trap that millions of people fall into right at this moment. They pick up a pen, they fill a notebook with beautiful insights, and they think they've arrived. They confuse the documentation of a truth with the possession of that truth. Let me be very clear with you. A notebook full of revelations that you do not live is nothing more than a graveyard of good intentions. Information without action is just a sophisticated form of self-deception. You think you're growing because your vocabulary is changing, but if your character is staying the same, you aren't studying. You're just collecting. I want to redefine a word that has been ruined by religion: obedience. Most of us hear that word and we think of a chore. We think of a heavy weight, a religious duty, or a way to keep a distant God from getting angry. That is not obedience. That is fear. Real obedience is actually the final stage of the learning process. It is the reality check of your understanding. Think about it this way. Imagine you want to learn how to swim. You can spend years in a library. You can study the physics of water, the mechanics of the stroke, and the biology of breath control. You can draw perfect diagrams of the pool in your journal and memorize the records of every Olympic champion. You can talk about swimming, you can teach others about swimming, and you can even write a book about it. But until your skin hits the cold water, you don't know how to swim. You only know the idea of swimming. In the same way, you can study forgiveness for a decade. You can know the Greek root of the word and the historical context of every parable. But you do not truly know forgiveness until you are standing face to face with the person who broke your heart and you choose to let go. Until that moment, your knowledge is just a ghost. It isn't real. It hasn't reached the world of the living. I call this living knowledge. The truth was never meant to be a static object that you store in a drawer. It was designed to be a performance. It only reveals its full weight when it is put into motion. Why do you think so many people study the Bible for years and still feel like they can't hear God? It's because their lives are cluttered with instructions they've heard but ignored. Every time you refuse to act on a truth you've received, you are building a layer of calloused skin over your spiritual ears. You are telling your brain that these words don't actually matter. But when you act, even when it's small, even when it's hard, you are sharpening your ability to hear. You are clearing the signal. Obedience is the only thing that keeps your hearing sharp. If you aren't doing the last thing he told you to do, why would he tell you anything new? Stop being a professional observer. An observer sits in the stands and critiques the game. A performer gets on the field and feels the dirt under their fingernails. Observation is a spectator sport, but transformation is a contact sport. You have to get your hands dirty with the reality of the word. So let me ask you, what is the one thing you read this week that made you feel uncomfortable? That specific thing you've been trying to study more just so you can avoid doing it? Stop studying it. Start doing it. Don't fill another page in your journal until you've filled a moment in your life with that truth. If the text says to be humble, go and serve someone who can do nothing for you. If it says to be honest, go and confess that lie you've been hiding. Do not wait for a feeling of readiness. Readiness doesn't come in the library, it comes in the water. When you move from the mind to the feet, something supernatural happens. Your theoretical God becomes a living reality. The voice that felt so distant becomes the breath in your lungs. You stop asking, what does this mean? And you start seeing what this does. This is the final threshold. This is the difference between a religious person with a fat notebook and a spiritual warrior with a transformed life. One reads to feel better, the other reads to get stronger. And the strength only comes through the resistance of the real world. When you learn to open this book with your hands and your feet, not just your eyes, the entire universe starts to look different. Because at that point, you aren't just studying the story anymore. You have become part of the story. And when the story becomes your life, that is when the pages truly start to burn. That is when the truth becomes your breath. That is when you finally, truly hear him speak. We have traveled a long road together in these last few minutes. We started with a simple but painful observation, that in an age where we possess the most information, we seem to possess the least transformation. We realized that our modern I culture, that habit of scanning, consuming, and possessing data, has actually made us deaf to the very voice we claim to be seeking. We've had to admit that our literacy was an illusion. We could see the letters, but we couldn't hear the heartbeat. But then we shifted our perspective. We looked at the ancient rhythm of the ear, the culture of hearing, of waiting, and of submitting to a sound that we cannot control. We saw that hearing God isn't a mystical accident. It is a neurobiological synchronization. Your brain was literally built to fire in sync with the logic of the eternal. We saw how the Heisenberg principle of our own bias, the observer effect, has been keeping us trapped in a loop of our own making, finding only what we already believed. We learned that the identity wall we've built to protect ourselves is the very thing preventing the neural upgrade our spirits are desperate for. And finally, we understood that knowledge isn't real until it hits the water of the real world. That obedience isn't a chore. It is the final, essential stage of understanding. So where does that leave you today? It leaves you at a threshold. You are no longer just a person with a book on your lap. You are a biological and spiritual receiver that has been tuned to a new frequency. The journey we've taken today isn't about giving you a better study method. It's about giving you a new way to exist in the presence of the truth. I want to invite you to a different kind of relationship with these pages. Stop opening this book to master it. Stop trying to figure it out so you can file it away in a notebook. Instead, I want you to open it so you can be mastered by it. I want you to sit with it until the words stop being an object you are looking at and start being a subject that is looking at you. When you sit down tomorrow morning, don't start by asking, what can I learn today? Start by asking, what in me needs to be dismantled today? Move from being the judge of the text to being the one on the stand. Let the searchlight of the infinite scan the parts of your life you've kept hidden behind your identity wall. Let the cognitive dissonance of a challenging verse stay with you all day. Don't run from the discomfort, vibrate with it. That discomfort is the sound of your old self dying so that a new, stronger version can be born. This is the shift from a religious routine to a biological and spiritual revival. When you move from the eye to the ear, from observation to synchronization, and from documentation to performance, something shifts in the atmosphere of your life. You stop being a person who quotes the truth, and you start being a person who is the truth in motion. The world doesn't need more people who can explain the text. It needs people who have been rewired by it. It needs people whose very breath has become an echo of the author's intent. So don't just go and study, go and be read. Don't just analyze the breath. Let the breath fill your lungs until every action you take is a living translation of what you've heard in the secret place. Go live the word until the word becomes your life. Amen.